Hi guys, good morning or afternoon or good evening, whatever it is for you when you're watching the video. So welcome to my channel, Heather Marie Art. I'm Heather Marie. We're going to do a watercolor picture of donuts today, and I'm going to show you and explain a couple different ways that you can transfer your artwork onto the watercolor paper, which is super important because watercolor paper can be damaged if we're drawing straight on it. So I'm also, one of those ways is we'll say not top secret. I haven't heard any other YouTuber or seen it on any other channel, this little trick on how to transfer the watercolor paper. And so I'll be showing you that when we go over the methods on how to transfer your artwork onto your watercolor paper. So we're gonna dig right in, and guys, this is a beginner picture, so it's not detrimental that you have the exact same paper, that you have the exact same paint or the exact same paintbrushes. What's entirely more important is that we are getting the lights and darks correct. So we'll kind of go over the materials and get started on transferring the artwork. So this is the printable graphite paper that is super cool and that I have not seen anybody use before. Then this is the supplies that we'll be using. Again, not important that they're exact same supplies that you have, but these are the ones that I'll be using. Okay, so this is where we're going to push the paper tray in. This is where you load up the paper. So we're going to take all of the regular paper out. I'm going to set it up top. And then this is where on one side you print on, and the other is where it's the graphite. Now what's super important is you look on your printer. Every printer is going to be different. I have a little indicator here on which side it prints on. And so depending on your printer, you're going to want to put it so that it's printing on the white side, not the graphite side. Inevitably, if you're like me, you're going to mess it up at least once and print on the graphite side, but you will have to reprint because it doesn't work on that side. So now we can print it, and if we go ahead and hit print now, we should be able to see it print properly on the white side, which is on the opposite side of the graphite. Now, if you had writing that you were wanting to transfer over, you would need to do a mirror image, because obviously we're going to be tracing it on the front side where it's printed on the color. So if it was writing and it's flipped over, it would be weird. So you want to take that into consideration depending on what you're trying to transfer over, or printing from your iPad from what you've drawn. And that's easy in the settings if you need to flip it around. You just got to be cognizant of that and make sure that you are doing it the correct way. And so now we've got our graphite on the back and we've got our picture on the front. That way we don't need two pieces of paper that you're going to have to be drawing through, you know, and this will be easier to give it that light touch to get the graphite on there. Okay, so here we have the donuts where I'm gonna have to do a cleanup on my printer. We've got some lines going through it, but it won't hurt us copying it over. So this is the one that we have the graphite on the back and the picture on the other side. So now we can put it on our watercolor paper, which is, we've got a block of the Beohong that is 8.3 by 5.9. So we've got that on here. The good thing about having the blocks is that you don't have to tape it down. It's attached all the way around except for a little space right in here that you can, I use my palette knife, but you can insert it, and then when it's all done, get the adhesive off, and then it should be perfectly flat, just like if you had taped it down. So now, so that we're on there correctly, I'm going to just cut off some of this excess graphite paper because it's not needed. Okay, and so now we have got where the graphite part is facing the watercolor paper. And I'm just going to put it a little bit farther down so that it's not perfectly centered in there. And then we are going to tape it down. And we'll use, I've always got a little bit of tape to the side. It is important, though, that we are, put it up a little bit, securing it pretty safely, because what you don't want is for it to shift while you are getting it transferred over. I will also make it so that I can have the corners secure, but also kind of lift it up and peek and make sure that it is coming through the way I want it to come through. So everybody kind of, you could use, some people like ballpoint pens, some people like pencil to kind of copy this through, which is basically just tracing it over. I think a little tip, though, is to use something that's got a little bit of color to it, so that way you can see where you have been and where you haven't been yet. And so, if you just start and follow along, and I suggest going as light as possible that you can still see it. And so we're going to check a little bit that it's going through, and we can see. So there's a little bit of a shadow on there for you guys. No, you can see that you can see it through. You can always, darken it up with the pencil. In this pencil, I have 2H, which is harder but much lighter lead, so that when you use watercolor, it's not going to run the graphite with water, but it's easily erasable. So if we needed to darken anything up, we could do it with that pencil. And so again, we've got to just make sure that it's staying in the right spot. But we can see now with that red pencil where we've been and where we haven't been. And so then we are just going to follow around the donut. Just making sure again that we're not going too heavy-handed, just light as possible. And every now and then it's a good idea to check that that it's going through correctly and that you can see it. So you want to make sure you're getting your little darker parts from where the icing is, where the indent, where the bread on the donut is cooked. And normally, I think it would be easy enough to draw this out on it. However, the problem is that if you mess up at all, it's the erasing part. It's not that it would be that hard to do a couple circles. So it's more about making sure that you're getting it on there and not hurting the paper. So if you're going to check at the end that you're not missing anything. But, I mean, it's just 3 donuts. So if we have to kind of draw something in you know, it's not a very intricate pattern, but the more intricate the pattern is, the more you want to really make sure before you pull your tape off that you're not missing anything, because it can be that much harder to make sure it's on there exactly where you want it to be. And again, we want to go, so we're gonna make sure this tape is on there really good, and we're going to flip it up and kind of make sure we've got everything the way we want it on there. And I think it's looking pretty good. I think we've gotten everything for the most part. We can, you know, look at it, and I think I'm going to go over that highlight a little bit. I think it went a little too light on that one. Other than that, I think we can kind of, you know, add stuff with the other pencil if we want. This shadow kind of ends in there, so we can kind of do that there. Oh, this highlight, I think we were a little light on. So we can make sure that's in there. We've got a little highlight here. That we don't want to forget. And I think we're looking good. So we can go ahead and pull this off. So now you can use this over and over. So obviously you can't throw it through the printer again, or at least I wouldn't. But that doesn't mean you couldn't, if you got a sketch out of your sketchbook or something like that, you could use the method where you would take tracing paper and go over it. You would write it all, you would copy it all down on tracing paper. If you were doing this, one of the other old school methods, make sure it was held down properly. Tracing it over this way. If you didn't have this, but you just had regular graphite, we're just kind of doing it for an example. And then you would take this and use the old school graphite paper, or the regular graphite paper. And so that would go face down on your watercolor paper, and then you would have to trace it like I just did if it was in a book where you couldn't get it to like this, but otherwise you could use straight on your artwork, depending if you wanted to draw on the artwork or not. So the tracing paper, sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. If you're printing it straight from the iPad, say it was a something you drew in the iPad, then you could do it like this, just print it out and go straight with the transfer paper. But you have to use the tracing paper sometimes if it is on a sketchbook that you can't put on top of the graphite paper like this on your pad. So then also there is, so these are the couple methods that we would use if we weren't using my really cool printable graphite paper method, which let me just show you what we're using here. So this is, got this at Hobby Lobby. It is Master's Touch, and it's the wax-free transfer paper that is printable and traceable. And so on the back, it shows just what we did. You can print it out, and then you flip it over, and you can put it wherever you need to put it. And so this is the only one I've been able to find that is printable like this, y'all. I actually bought this 3 different times and have used it and didn't realize until one of the days I was looking at the back of it that it actually was printable, and tried it out, and I was like over the moon, because it's just such another step to trace your artwork again if it's on something that you can't use. I was using the light pad, which I'll show you one of those. I don't have it plugged in right now, but it's, so you turn this on, this is a light, and then you can see, you can't use this though when it's on a pad. You'd have to have it like a sheet of paper. You put that on there, and so pretending that this tracing paper is your artwork paper, then you would be going through, and then it would be on your paper. So depending on if your drawing is digital, if your drawing is in a sketchbook, you know, each method is going to work differently for you. So the good thing is that knowing about all of them and having them all available. All right, guys, looks like I've got some mixes together. I think we've got a good starting off point for the lighter part of the donut in the middle, and then as it gets darker and more browned. We also have to remember that the light is coming from this upper left-hand area, and so it's going to be darker on the right side where the shadows are coming in and stuff. So we have to keep that in mind as we start painting as well. So what I have started off with the mixes is for the darker part, I've got gold ochre and I've got yellow ochre. So in this first little cubby here, I've got the regular yellow ochre with a little bit of buff titanium and a little bit of white and hair of yellow, and the one above it had a little too much yellow, so added a little bit more white, and that's looking pretty good for that lighter color. Now on this mixture, it's the same mixture except for using more of the gold ochre, which it looks golden on that bread, a little bit more golden on there. And so that's what we're gonna use as a jumping off point to get started. We're going to start with the lightest color, which is this one right here that I told you that the mix with more of the white and just the yellow ochre instead of the gold ochre. And kind of rinsing out my brush, getting out most of the water. There's a little water still in there. And we're gonna start off with that. And we're gonna start from this side. And this line we did was the middle line where the dough kind of crinkles together. So we didn't really indicate off, which is okay because it's more organic of a shape where the middle kind of goes and where the more golden begins. So we're just going to kind of go around that area, and we'll kind of make that line more definitive as when we put in the golden. So we're making this middle line in here. And then we're going to come through with more of the golden ochre, and we're going to start more right closer up to the icing, where the icing ends. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It is watercolor. So if you kind of just meet them, they're going to roll together a little bit and mix together, which is what we want. We want them to kind of mix together. That's why we're doing it so close and not letting the one dry so that they can kind of mix together. We'll have a definitive line where it starts and stops, but it's not going to, it's going to give it a little chance to mix together a little bit as well, which is what we want. And if we leave a little bit of air bubble or some little spots here and there, that's good. It is a bread, So it does have those little spots where it's lighter and darker in some areas. So we're just kind of following along with the picture. We don't want to make it look like a line. So it's going to mix together. It's starting to dry a little bit more right now. So, you know, we want to make sure that where we're meeting them is more of an organic shape or a line rather than just straight across, because unlike where this donut ends at the bottom where it's more straight across, we want where it meets that lighter part to be a little bit more organic, because it is organic, you know, where it bakes and stuff. And so now we're going to get a little bit more gold ochre on the brush and that into there, and then we're cutting it close because things are starting to dry, but this is a darker area back here. So we're going to make sure that this is a little bit darker through here and where it's a little bit lighter over there. We've got a little bit of a line that ended up here, so we're going to kind of just make sure that ends more organic there. Get a little bit of water off the brush, kind of blend that a little bit. Things are starting to dry, so we're going to need to stop, let it dry, and start again. What we don't want to do is continue messing with it when it's in that state of limbo. So with watercolor, you can work wet on wet or wet on dry. But once you're in that in-between stage where things are starting to dry, it's where you can do some very cool techniques, but where also you can start to make some techniques that you didn't intend to on your picture. And I'm going to do some more videos on that in the future. But for right now, we just want to say that unless we're intending to make those, we either want to continue on wet with it where it is wet, or as it's starting to dry, stop, let it dry, and then continue on. Or you'll end up with some very cool effects that we were not meaning to have at that time. Okay, so let's start on the next one. We'll go back to that lighter color in the middle. I think I added a little too much water in there, so I'm going to get a little bit more of the regular yellow ochre. And this is Winsor & Newton on these bottom two rows. This is Schminky, Schminky, this row right here, and then you got Daniel Smith at the top. And then this all is Daniel Smith, except for that green is Van Gogh. So, and I think I will have all the colors written. At least they'll be added in the description below, but I might be able to add them on the screen. Okay, so we've got our middle color there. And again, we've got the middle line where the crease is. So the lighter spot goes on either side of that. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to just carry on with that. Kind of looking at the picture, making sure we're kind of keeping it semi to the same height or width, however you want to say it, as it is in the picture. But again, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is very, very organic. We are running out a little bit more of the darker colors, so we're going to go in with a little bit of this golden ochre. Got a little bit more of the buff titanium. I love the Daniel Smith buff titanium. I hadn't tried it before up until about a couple months ago. It comes in handy for so much stuff. I love it. Absolutely love it. can also use a little bit of that color in there too. Okay, so we want to do this quickly so that it doesn't dry out on us. And again, we're going to meet this, but we want to make sure that we're meeting the icing a little bit more solidly than and leaving it very organic, where we're meeting the yellow ochre as far as in the middle. We don't want it to be just a straight line. Again, if we have little spots that we miss, it's okay. It's going to make it look a little bit more like it's bread baking. So again, we're coming down here and meeting the color so that it can kind of run together. And then we come across, and we got to make sure you're working fairly quickly, because if you let it dry, then it's not going to blend for you very well. Kind of lost the line there. I think it's right about there. See, as it starts to dry, it does start to not run as much. So again, you want to work as quickly as you can, but making sure that you're not going too sloppy because you're going quick. So that's why it's so important to have the drawing kind of marked out, or at least for me, it's very important, because you can kind of get lost. And so don't worry, like maybe this one's a little bit darker than this one. You know, we're kind of starting off with our lighter colors, and we can go in there with a second layer and darken it up. Although it probably does get darker as it goes down. Okay, so I'll follow along. This one's a little bit shorter here. Follow along here with this middle line. And again, you see how easy it is. This is something that's very organic. It's you know, you don't need to make sure you're following it. That's why it's also would be very easy to draw this one out. It's a donut. It's not, it doesn't need to be followed to the T. So now we've got this one. It can be your own donut, however you want to make it, and just use picture as a jumping off point. So we can, again, we want to make sure that we're really lining up with where the icing is, but that it's very organic where it meets in the middle. You just only have to kiss those colors, and it will, as long as it's still wet enough for where you put down that color, it will kind of run together very nicely. And make sure we don't start following the shadow there. I think I was almost... So you always want to have your pencil lines light enough so that you're not going to see through it with the watercolor, but you don't want to lose your place as you're following along. Okay, so I think that's a good spot. Now, the most important thing with watercolor, like as much as you're going to want to fiddle with it, this one maybe needs to be a little darker, or this one a little lighter, or what have you. You do not want to fiddle around with these in-between stages. You must let it dry in between. I tell you this with experience. Unless you know the kind of little effects that it will do as it's in the middle of drying and stuff, you want to stay away from doing that as much as possible. Okay, so we will pick back up after we let this dry. All right, guys, so it looks like this middle one especially, it has bled a little bit more than we want, so we're gonna put a little bit of water on there and then lift out a little bit so that we can lighten this up just a hair. Okay, so getting everything, making sure everything's staying misted. And by the way, this spray bottle is a great one, comes in handy. It is a fine, extra fine mist spray bottle. Especially good if you are painting with acrylic and you want to keep things wet, but you don't want it wet and to run. So, playing around with figuring out the strawberry icing and chocolate icing and the white icing. So I was doing some of the colors. Looks like this was a mixture of a little bit of opera pink and then a little bit of Quin Coral from Daniel Smith, which I just got, and that's a really nice color. I was watching, I think her name is Bucciarelli, and she's just an awesome watercolor artist as it is, but she goes into detail about the different reds, and that was where maybe I had a weak spot of enough reds of the different tones, and I would always get confused as which one was cooler and warmer. And she did some great videos that you know what, I'll link them down below because I found them so informative and ended up getting some of the colors. So Quin Coral was one of the ones I got. So I did a little bit of Opera Rose, a little bit of Quin Coral, and a little bit of Buff Titanium, and I think it is going to be an awesome strawberry. So did some of that. It's dried up a little bit now. So what we'll do is we'll do a little bit of this and we'll put it here out of the way. And we can go kind of darker later. It's dried up a little bit. And I sprayed it with the fine mist, but we can add a little bit of water. And then as far as for the chocolate, which you saw on that paper as well, all I did so far for that was the burnt umber. And I think that might work just as is. It's a nice chocolatey brown. I don't feel like we need to add too much more to it, but we'll see as we go along. Maybe there's something more that we'll want to add. Now, when we go back in with the donut part, I think it's really good to unify colors when you can. And so what we may do is use a pinch of the brown, or the, let's call it right, burnt umber, into the donut mixture to do some of those really golden parts or the really darker parts, and that will tie things, I mean, just a smidge, because we don't want it super dark. I mean, it's very close to what it should be as is. But if we go a hair darker in the shadows and where it is a little bit darker, that'll help with the lights being lighter, as well as unifying the colors. Now the bottom white one, I think we're going to do neutral tint for in the shadow places, and then the highlights, obviously, you know, not any color there. So on both of these, the strawberry and the chocolate, we're going to start out with a very light color, so that if any mistakes are made, if we accidentally go into the highlight or whatever, we can come back from it. It's just good all in all to build up the color. So I'm going to add water to both of these, and then we'll go in and put a beginner layer in one and a beginning layer in the other one. So let's get on in there. I still think we're going to go with the number 8 silver black velvet. I have the number 4 up here if we feel like there's any need to get into the nooks and crannies. The good thing is it comes to a great point. I love the black velvet. I use those a whole lot when I'm doing the watercolors. So we're gonna get in and start this layer of strawberry first. I think we're gonna start from the top down. That way we're not putting our hand in anything. I added some water to it I always like to have a little card on hand to make sure things are as I think they are as we're going along. Okay, so that looks light enough to me. And so we are going to dive in. And remember, it is lighter on that left side and darker on the right. And we've got this big highlight. In fact, I think before I get too far, I am going to sort of pick up the highlight at least a little bit so I can just barely see it, because when it's for the shadows and stuff, it will definitely cover it up, but you don't want to see any of that through the watercolor. It gets harder. I mean, you can still sometimes erase it after the watercolor's down, but it becomes harder and harder. So as long as we can still see it. So just to make sure that we are dark enough, I'm going to start from that right-hand side and go on to the left-hand side. And so we've got a little highlight there, and then we've got a little highlight there that are, and then a little bit on some of these tips that are super, super white. So we're just going to be real careful that we don't get anything there. If we do, it's not the end of the world. We can pull it back up. And let's see. So we're going to want to make sure that the area is real dark in here. So sometimes I get real quiet as I'm painting in there. I need to give myself a little bit more room for my hand there. Little shaky. I need another cup of coffee. Just kidding. So you always want to be careful as you are painting these that you're not letting any of the edges dry. So that's something you want to be mindful of as you're going through. I'm running my mouth as I'm going along, and so it's okay to go super slow and take your time. You just want to make sure that you are not letting any of those edges dry, because then you'll be able to see a marcation of them, which is not what you want. I started with this left side because I figured if we run out of some of the icing color, we can add some water, and then it would get lighter as we go around. So we're probably going to add a little bit of water in a second as we come around the corner. You just want to be careful about going back over stuff over there. But again, like I said, we don't want to let any of the lines dry. So I'm going to have to get a little bit quicker in there. And it's okay if it goes a little bit. It's icing. It's going to kind of splodge everywhere. So again, we just don't want to let any of these edges dry. So as we're coming around this highlight, we just want to be careful. So I'll go ahead and do some of it now. There we go. Some of these I think are a little whiter, so maybe we'll take some of that back off of there. And what we'll do, we'll rinse off the brush, kind of squeeze it out a little bit, and then we'll kind of smooth out this area so that it's not leaving a harsh line. And again, we washed out our brush so there wasn't hardly any pink on it. And then we took out most of the water so that it would suck up some of this pink here, which we're gonna suck up some of that too. I went a little bit icing overboard. And then we'll do that again. We'll rinse out the brush. And then we are taking out a lot of the water so that we can just kind of keep these highlights as is, make sure there's no harsh lines on anything that where we don't want it. Over here is okay because this is going to be in shadow. If it's overlapping a little bit, actually we kind of want it to. It will be helpful. Here we're just going to, again, just take just a little bit more at the top, because at the bottom it's more solid as that line comes across, but here we're going to just suck up a little bit of it so that it's not such an indent there. Well, what we're going to do really quick is I am going to get just a little bit of the Quin Coral and a little bit of the Opera Rose over here so that we have just a hair darker of a pink right here. And right where we've got a little bit of time because it is not to that dry point yet, but we don't have much time. So we're just kind of going in where we know it's very dark of the color, dark pink. And kind of letting that dry in just a hair darker. Kind of goes around, it looks like here. And again, we'll clean that up, but at least it's going to we sucked up some of the water right here. Just want to make sure we didn't suck up too much. So now we've got a little bit of where it's going to be more pink and a little bit more shadow in there. We've got our highlights still there. And especially, let's do one more where we're cleaning off the brush and then getting all the excess water out of it. And then kind of blurring this line a little bit around where the icing is. It's not necessary. If we leave it the way that it is, it's just going to look like it's a very crisp highlight, which it's a little bit more blended in the picture, but that's okay. That's the beauty of it being our picture. We can do it however we want to do it. So just do that a little bit. I don't even know if it's actually doing anything at this point. And now this is where I can get myself into trouble and keep fiddling. And so that is what we don't want to do. So we're going to leave it, let it dry. And we're going to move on to the chocolate icing. And I think I added a little bit of water to it. We're going to do it a little test because it has been sitting out to dry. So I just like to do a little dab as it still is dark. It needs some water because, like I said, we want to do the first couple layers on the lighter side. That way, if we overlap something we don't want to, or we, you know, and especially building it up, it's always going to look better as you build up the layers instead of going in hot and heavy. It's going to give it more depth and stuff. So there's a little bit of highlight in here. And then maybe a little bit here and here. Other than that, nothing is stark white highlight. So we're going to avoid those little areas by just coming in here and staying closer, I think, to the top at first. Yeah, so going in there, gonna avoid this little guy there. And we've got our picture here so that we can, you know, look, you want to constantly be checking and making sure that you are following along. That is, if that's what you're wanting to do. If you're wanting to go rogue and kind of do with the icing or the highlights exactly where you want to, go for it. You know, it's your picture. You can do what you want. And this is very organic, so it is perfectly okay. You are the artist. You can do what you want. So we are, again, just following along, giving it a nice, good icing. Over here, it gets a lot darker in the back and stays much lighter frosting in the front, like it's like a highlight. And so as we get everything filled in, we may go with a darker red in the back, you know, just a little splodge as it's drying. But that's why you always want to start out with the lightest. Or that's why I always start out with the lightest first, and you're building up that depth. And that way, you get darker where you need to get dark as you go on with the layers. And instead of going in with just such a dark color at first, and it would create harsh lines, and the possibility for getting into somewhere you don't want to get into would be a lot greater, as well as not being able to get that fixed, pull it back out of there if the darker it is. So again, we're carefully going through, getting the icing on there. And again, if you want to follow the lines a little differently, you most certainly can. It is an organic shape. So you can kind of, I do a little bit of both. I kind of follow along as my jumping off point, and if I, you know, want to change something, I change it as I go along. And that's, you know, when I'm doing a picture of something, that can be in the drawing, or that can be as I'm going along right in here at this point. So you can see it's already getting dry at this point, so that would be dangerous to start poking around over there too much. And so this is where we want to be very careful. Again, you can do some effects that you really don't want to do if you start poking around when it's half dry. Now it's still really wet over here, and it's kind of dark along that part there. So we're just going to come along with just getting it a little bit more brown, and we'll just kind of go in here and see if it might blend so that it doesn't even, it's not even noticeable, you know. I'd like to swoop in over there, but I'm going to hold myself back because, like I said, it can get you in trouble. But we will get some dark over here going, and it will naturally kind of spread out. And then on our next layer, we can get a little darker and continue on that way. And we'll just let that kind of pull it as far as it wants to that way. Now we are going to go in with some neutral tint, super, super light, because white is never white, y'all. Even though it seems like it's white, with watercolor, it's never white. So what you're actually doing is you're painting the shadows. So we're going to come in here and get a little bit of natural tint, and we will stick it over here in this square, and then we'll put a little dab here, because we are really, it's going to be extremely, extremely light. So we'll put a hair of water on this one, and then lots of water in here. Like I said, extremely, extremely light. So we're going to try to get most of it off of our brush here. We're going to go in here, and again, we're going to do a little tester, y'all, because instead of going straight in, you know, and then having to fix things, we're going to, you know, give it a little look-see like that on there, and then we'll know if it's too dark or if it's good to go. We're going to do that, and we're going to let it dry for a second. Okay, neutral tint is looking pretty good. dig in and do a layer of the natural tint. I'm going to start off this time, I think, on this layer going around the highlights so that I don't lose them. So I'm going to kind of do one right in here against the edge. And then as I follow along here, it's kind of darker along there. But to me, there's one in here. And so we're just gonna kind of do one in there. Don't want to make any edges. However, on this one, I do want to grab some water and almost get all of the neutral tint off the brush. So it's very watered down. And I'm just going to kind of bring this back into an even lighter until it kind of just falls off. Because it looks to be, like I said, I didn't even notice it that the line was off because it blends in so much with the background. So I think that will be good to do that there. Overlapping a little bit, which is okay because we're going to do another layer of where we darken up the bread and those shadows. And so like where we've overlapped a little bit here and there onto the donut part right there, it will I believe it will blend in. We'll go ahead and get a little bit of it off with a clean brush right now, but it will just help to make that shadow, I think, a little bit more. So just kind of scooping that up. Making sure we're following the edge that we put in there, not the edge that is. And so we can do a hair more going under here, just kind of loosely following along with where we know that shadow is going to go. It's going to spread and just going to give it an overall darkness back here. So we'll still need to kind of go in and define that shadow a little bit more, but at least it will, it's a little bit darker through here too. Oop. It's starting to dry back there, so got to be careful. And we will, it's getting dark real fast, I think, on there. Everything dries a lot lighter than you think. So, but we're going to come in and just grab some of that up, I think. That way we're making sure we're not getting in there and going too light too fast. What do you guys think? Okay, and so we will let that, some of this is even a little bit lighter in here. So we'll go ahead and lift some of that back up. So when you're lifting that up, you want to rinse out your brush really good, and then make sure, I don't know if you guys are seeing, I'm drying it off on a little towel right here. Make sure that it's dried off, and then once you've sucked up some, you've got to kind of do it again. So you're making it clean because you don't want to introduce any color back in there, but then you are sucking up what you can. So with the water, we can go ahead and kind of make a line on where we want that shadow to kind of blend off so that it's not a super, super harsh line. And it kind of blends off back here. And again, we're gonna go in with a super light layer. It is very dark right as you get close to the donut, which we can do. But I think right now we want to start out with just a super, super light shadow. And we can come in with it darker as we build the next layer. So we didn't water all the way through here, and we're gonna go to the edge here. We only watered kind of where the edges of the shadow was, and that's more so that we didn't have any harsh lines, so it kind of bleeds off into the existence, which I think was about there, wasn't it? Well, we can come in with some water. Again, you don't ever want to come in with like a whole bunch of water, so we're going to get some of that off of there. So we'll just make sure by doing that. I think we've got it extremely light here, so we'll kind of darken it up a bit more. And it starts like way back here with really, really dark. Again, we are going to start off with this lighter layer. We're going to stay close to the donut here where it is darker, and we'll let that kind of work its way off with the water for now. And we'll go in with a darker later on the next, a darker on the next layer. Sorry guys, it's like I'm getting used to talking and explaining things as painting. It is something you got to get used to doing, I think. So we'll add some water. This is the darkest donut part right here, the more golden color. And I think, like I said, if we add a hair of brown, the burnt umber, excuse me, to it, it will kind of unify it a little bit with that icing, but it'll give it that darkness that it needs. Start off all the way to the right. See how it's looking. That way we can always lighten it up as we turn the corner and go into the right. I'm going to stick on the glasses for a little bit, make sure that we are getting in there as we need to. Okay, so looks like, and again, we're not following anything except for the line that we have drawn in there for right now. You can kind of see it faintly, and if you can't see it, you can make up your own line. And at some places there are multiple lines in it, or it kind of gets lighter and darker in some places. So I'm kind of resting my hand with my pinky, as you guys can see that, because we've got it, it's still a little wet down there at the bottom. And there is even some much darker splotches in some of the areas here, which we can do just a little bit here and there. You know, we're being a little careful with this line, but it is a donut. It has crinkles and wrinkles, right? Crinkles and wrinkles, as a good donut should. And then I'm going to go out here a little bit, just so that on this lighter part we're not going too dark. kind of does its own thing in a couple areas, and I think it go a little water here because there's areas where there's lines, but it's a lot lighter. So we'll do some of those. Again, you know, I'm looking to kind of help with these organic shapes, but I am kind of doing my own thing at the same time. So there's some lines on that donut, which is looking pretty darn good if you ask me. And then we will load up and we will do the middle one. And it looks to be, the line looks to be a lot darker on this one here in the middle. So, and I suppose where there is the pencil line in there, we definitely need to follow so that we're not seeing that. But we can certainly add more, or wherever we want. More of the line, or more little, I think there's some little dots and stuff too that are interesting. So we need to make sure we're putting those in as well. We'll go to the little bit lighter part as it gets lighter over here. Let's see here. There's quite a few areas where it's kind of just, it's not a straight line. It's just kind of going off a little bit here. We don't want it to look like a perfect line. It is a baked good, right? I'm doing some splodges and some little, whatever you want to call it, in there. We're getting crazy now. Okay. So let's go on and do the bottom one as well. Kind of fades off on this one a little bit. You can see the pencil line a little bit, so I came in there. It's almost a kind of separates and starts again on this one in a couple different places. And then kind of fades out again, I think, on this one. Oh, got a little thick there. There we go on that one. I think it's looking pretty good there. What do you guys think? Go in with some more, you know, and this, like, again, this is your, you know, those that are following along with it, this is your piece. So if you want to have, you want to go nuts with the little dots and lines and all of the different textures in there, you know, this go nuts. We're gonna go in and darken it up a little bit where it meets the donut up top, and a little bit on the bottom, make it more golden on each one of these. And so when we do that, we'll add a little bit more texture as we go on each one. Right now, we're gonna let that dry, and when we let that dry, and then we'll go in with another layer. Okay, we are all dried up, so let's go in and get a darker layer of our strawberry icing. So we will get a little bit of the coral. Get a little bit of the opera rose. I think we still want to bring in a hair of the buff titanium. Just kind of calm it down a bit. It still has the icing look to it, and I think that'll help keep it that icing look and not just pure. Right up here by the hole of the donut, it looks to me, you know, like right in here, I think we need to have it really fairly dark, and then it kind of fades out through there. I think it's super dark, or super pink, I should say. And it doesn't look like it goes all the way to the edge. Kind of does like a little ripple here. It's more pink through here. There. Also, looks like it's still pretty pink, but a little bit lighter of a pink. In through here, as it kind of gets closer over, it's just not as dark, I feel like. Just like into here, it's dark, but it kind of calms down. I think with here, kind of. And I think we'll kind of blend it out a little bit. We need a little bit of a lot lighter of a color there. I think still right up in here, it kind of is darker in between the highlight and in between where it gets lighter below. So we'll see what that looks like there. I'm just kind of breaking up that from being super, super harsh of a color, same as maybe right here. Just break it up a little bit. This kind of highlight is a bit harsh. And so is here. So we're just gonna kind of, with water, just try to soften that up a bit through there and through here. Not much, just a little bit, so it's not jarringly white highlight. I think we've got some good darks in there. There might be a couple areas where it's a hair darker. But overall, I think it looks pretty good. So I think we can, for now, let that kind of dry and move on to the chocolate one. And the chocolate, we've got to definitely get some more chocolate going on. So again, this is the burnt umber. This is Daniel Smith burnt umber. So for the dark, 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 we're going to start about right in here and hug this line of the donut really well as we go around. Try to kind of follow it like the same line that we did earlier as much as we can. And this dark, dark kind of goes a little bit wider back here. Actually, it stays pretty wide. I don't want this to dry. It's fairly thick, so, oops, get this going. Almost dipped it into the neutral tint. That certainly would have made it darker in a different way. Okay, so we're getting that dark in there. We're gonna mix a little bit in that in there, because we've got, it gets a little bit, you see, got like a little bit of a shadow here, kind of doesn't all the way go to the edge. Kind of stops down. Then we've got a little bit again here, just where it's a little bit darker, where I think it's the edge of the icing coming down and it's kind of highlighted at the bottom. Again, this is all very organic, so it's not, doesn't have to be perfect. It's just kind of showing that there is darks and lights coming around that's making this icing look shinier. Again, this is the lighter over here. So we're getting some of the, here we want it a little bit more spread out. Down here it's a little bit less abrupt. So we're gonna, I think, darken all of it a little bit with this watered down chocolate, because we're a little light. And we can kind of blend it in, make this shadow here a little bit more the way we want it to look. So it was getting a little too light in there. And again, here I think is just too light in places. So we can darken that up and it will help some of these highlights blend a little bit, I think, to it. So it's like that. Kind of comes off there from the shadow from the donut. And it is a lot lighter there, but go in these places. It's a little bit darker here. Kind of comes a little bit in there with the highlights. Ooh, I think we're looking icing-ish now around more with this chocolate. What do you guys think? It's kind of straight there, but not extremely. Okay, so we'll wash our brush and we'll get in this little darker of a neutral tint on that bottom. And I think we need to be real careful because because we've got a good all over light color. I think we just need to get in the really darks, and I think we'll be, you know, pretty much right there. So I don't think we need to go all over color though. I don't think so at this point, but we will see as we go forward. Okay, so we'll go ahead and mix that in there. Let's see how dark we actually are. That's pretty good. What we might do is just do a little pull next door. Go a little bit darker. That way we can maybe hug a thin line of really dark and then blend it out a little bit more with the lighter one next door. Okay, so it's kind of right about here where it starts, and like I said, we're gonna hug pretty close. We'll just kind of go along there. Maybe switch into a little bit lighter one that's still really pretty dark. And then it kind of goes down in here just a little bit. So again, I'm just using the lighter one right now to kind of make sure that line doesn't dry up so that we can't blend in the darker on it. Because it is still a little bit darker right up close to the donut. So we're gonna go in there a little bit darker. Okay, we gotta be careful though, because now it's gonna run all the way. However, we can pull some of that up. So that it's not so wet in there, so that it won't follow it as much, because we want to get a little darker in here. We can also let it dry a little bit and then go in a little darker there too. Because it goes down that far, it just, that, and we can do a little bit more. It's a little bit darker at the bottom here, underneath this highlight, to kind of make it pop a little bit. And then it gets really light, you know. Kind of in between those. And so we'll let that dry just a second or two. Actually, it kind of goes a little bit further here, but just a little lighter. I feel like it doesn't just end, but it's not as incredibly dark. So also, the thicker the paint is, the less it's going to run. That we've pulled some of that water out. I just don't want to go too far down with it. I need to darken it up. It just doesn't go too far down is all. And I don't want it to run too far down, so. Got to be careful. And this is the darker one, because it is very dark right in here. I went up a little higher here, so we're gonna have to darken that in. These donuts aren't perfectly flat, are they? So it's okay. So then, if we clean our brush, get the water out of there, we can possibly soften this down a little bit, but not where it runs too much. Okay, so we'll let that dry, see where we're at. I think it's looking really good, y'all. I think we could possibly, go in with a little bit darker on the shadow one on the bottom. Let's see. Possibly go a little darker. You can tell it's an important moment when I get silent. Important area. So it's fairly dark through here. I think it kind of... Okay. So, a little thicker through there. Not too much. It definitely is darker and thicker. So it gets a little wider here, but then it starts to blend off a little bit more. That's what I'm seeing there. And we'll even blend out a little bit further. So if we clean out our brush and then, so it's fairly sharp right in there, but it does start to kind of not be so sharp right in here. So we can kind of blur that line with a clean, damp, not wet, but damp paintbrush. So that's kind of what we're doing right here. And then we've got, you know, it's like faint, faint, faint line back here in the back, which I think it's done pretty good. We'll kind of I think it really just kind of thins out to nothing back there. So if we just kind of wet it down, it should travel into kind of nothing for the most part. Okay, so all right, let's look at this, where we're at, because this is where we're fairly far along. This is where it's more important that you're getting the lights and the darks in the picture more so than we're matching exact colors. Like we can have whatever pink we want we can have whatever brown we want. We can make it whatever color. But if it's all too light or there's no lights and darks, it's not going to read as well. So we want to make sure that we're getting those in there. I think that we've got to get in there once these dry with the bread and do that little bit more golden color underneath the icings a little bit and on the tops and the bottoms. And I think, you know, here and there with the dots and the places where it has baked and turned a little bit more golden brown, I think then we're going to be right where we want to be and see where we're at. So we'll start in here. Like I said, start in towards the back. That way we know it's darker back there. And like I said, we don't have to do it perfect. It's more about that we might even need to go a little bit more dark under there. Possibly. I think it's a good color though as we round this corner and we are into the lighter spot more. I think that's going to work very well there. I don't think want any of it to look too perfect. So kind of just dotting things around a little bit, you know, not overly wet brush. We've got a very on the drier side brush because we want to have those little marks here and there as we're going along, so that it's naturally kind of building in those little spots. And we're gonna hug a little bit more closer there because again, this is the lighter side, so we're just trying to kind of build it up a little bit more. And we can even go in here where it's watered down a little bit, just get most of it off. And just kind of, if you hear people behind me, I'm sorry. There's other people working around and doing stuff, getting stuff done around here. Yeah, that looks like it's more of a baked good, more stuff going on in there. Okay, so now we're going to go along the bottom a little bit. Not so much right up there on the line, I think, as much as maybe a little bit here where the darker starts to happen. Like, and again, we're just kind of being organic. We just want it to get a little bit darker in here. It's a baked good. We don't want it to be, you know, and it's good. So my brush is getting drier and I think that's even better. So we're staying away from the lighter part in there, but we are letting that dry brush kind of just go through, staying on the darker part there. And that gives us all those little squiggly donut stuff in there, if you know what I mean by squiggly donut stuff. The darker parts and stuff. So let's see how we're doing in here. Start off along the line of the icing like we were doing. We've kind of stayed a little bit or close to the line on this one. We were dancing around everywhere up on the strawberry donut. So here, let's get a little bit more. Get some of those marks going. This is called dry brushing, where it's it really is just kind of skipping along that color and kind of giving it that broken line, if you will, which is helpful on breads and stuff like we're doing. It's kind of gives it that broken line. Okay, so let's go along on the bottom. Does do a little bit darker in certain spots first, and then we'll do the dry brushing around it. Try not to, remember, try to stay very organic with the lines. Try not to go too straight following the bottom. I think the more we stay a little messy and organic, I think the more realistic this is going to look. Also, what's helping with this dry brush technique that we should probably talk about, this is cold press paper, which has a lot of ridges and stuff on it. And so as you scrape across the top, it's going to pick up on those ridges, but not so much on the lower ridges of it. So that's another reason why we can get that look where it's just browned on. And that's what the bread does, I think, too, when it bakes, right? It's the highest point in the bread that has the darkest spots, and then like the lower ones are like the lighter color, I think. Okay, so we'll get the bottom one going here. Go down here, and remember to stay organic in the line. We don't want to stay too neat and perfect, because it will not look as donut-ish, I think, the more organic we stay. I'm gonna go a little bit lighter here. It feels like while it's still got those dry brushing and stuff there, I think it feels a little lighter on this edge, so I don't want to go too dark there. So that's why it kind of like watered it off a little bit, and we're just kind of popping around. And you know, we can always pick it up a little bit if we think it's too dark or whatever. I always have, or typically most of the time have, a rag or excuse me, a shop towel in my hand for that very reason, so that, you know, you can kind of pick stuff up off the picture itself, or, you know, dry your brush off, whatever needed. If you've got it right there in your hand, then you can kind of go with it right away, because those things, you know, everything dries very fast. Okay, so let's see, we'll go down here a little bit. It also, so we're kind of skipping around until it's dry enough that it's not going to leave too big of a mark. Whoop, we're a little dark in there, aren't we? It is kind of dark there, though. So remember, as long as we stay organic and we're not following a straight line anywhere. Woo, donut-y. That looks like a donut I want to eat. How about you guys? Okay, so I think that's looking really good. Is there any spots where we want to darken things up anymore? So this is where you can kind of stop, take a look. You know, are we as dark as we need to go in certain spots? Do we need to go darker anywhere? I think our shadow down there needs to be a little darker. Here and here, I think, on both of those. So we can do that next. There might be a couple spots here and there where we could have, you know, hugged underneath this icing a little bit more. Again, don't do too much of a straight line. But I think we're looking pretty good. See, already there, I think I did too much of a straight line, possibly. So we can go in and dry brush it up maybe a little bit. Okay. All right, we'll quit messing with that. And let's get this shadow in here, this darker shadow of the natural tint. Okay, so this is dried up a lot on the palette, so I imagine it probably is pretty close to the darkness we need. Maybe not. Well, we happen to have it right here, so we can always dig in. It's next to the yellow ochre. Very dark. Okay, so is very dark right up against it. Two. I think it still is wet a little bit in there. Gets thicker. As it comes around a little bit. Not too thick, but it does get thicker. This extremely dark of the shadow, I feel like. I think I'm going a little too wavy. I think it evens out the donut a little bit, the shadow. Just more rounded. Because it kind of fans out. Okay. We're gonna let that sit for a second and dip in and give this one a little bit more dark as well up here. Try to keep our hand out of it. It doesn't go as dark as far around on this one, but I think right about here, it's pretty darn dark. And that little indent, it would be that dark too. And it is that dark right about there. And then I think it's don't think it stays as dark as it is down here. Okay, so let's look at that. Maybe it does go a little bit. So we'll go to that second darker one. Because I think it goes a little darker there around, just like here, but it's not as dark. So then I think what happens is it does start fading out a little bit here, but gradually. I don't think we want any harsh lines. So I think we're looking pretty good there. What do you guys think? And again, now we're messing with it when it's not all the way dry. We really should be stopping and letting this dry. So we're gonna stop there, let it dry. I think we're looking really good. As I'm looking for the lights and darks, I think that, I think we're there. I think this is a great beginner painting. I think that you guys have done a good job following along. Remember to like and subscribe if you've liked this tutorial and following along with me. But also, don't forget to write any questions. If there's something that you notice that I didn't explain well enough, write the questions down. Maybe it's something I can expand on, or I will answer them below. Thank you for coming on the art journey today with this tutorial, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. All right, come see us again soon. Thank you.